annoying. Okay, so Glass Castle, I am at section 2, which is Welch. So that's where I'm picking up. Back in Battle Mountain, we'd stopped naming Wall's family cars because they were all such heaps that Dad said they didn't deserve names. Mom said that when she was growing up on the ranch, they never named the cattle because they knew they would have to kill them. If we didn't name the car, we didn't feel as sad when we had to abandon it. So the piggy bank special was just the Oldsmobile, and we never said the name with any fondness or even pity. That Oldsmobile was a clunker from the moment we bought it. The first time it conked out, we were still an hour shy of the New Mexico border. Dad stuck his head under the hood, tinkered with the engine, and got it going, but it broke down again a couple of hours later. Dad got it running, more like limping, he said, but it never went any faster than 15 or 20 miles an hour. Also, the hood kept popping up, so we had to tie it down with rope. We steered clear of the toll booths by taking 2-lane back roads where we usually had a long line of drivers behind us honking in exasperation. When one of the Oldsmobile's windows stopped rolling up in Oklahoma, we taped garbage bags over it. We slept in the car every night, and after arriving late in Muskogee and parking on an empty downtown street, we woke up to find a bunch of people surrounding the car. Little kids pressing their noses against the windows and grown-ups shaking their heads and grinning. Mom waved at the crowd. "You know you're down and out when the Okies laugh at you," she said. With our garbage bag taped window, our roped down hood, and the art supplies tied to the roof, we'd out-Okied the Okies. The thought gave her a fit of the giggles. I pulled a blanket over my head and refused to come out until we were beyond the Muskogee city limits. "Life is a drama full of tragedy and comedy," Mom told me. "You should learn to enjoy the comic episodes a little bit more." It took us a month to cross the country. We might as well have been traveling in Conestoga wagon. Mom also kept insisting that we make scenic detours to broaden our horizons. We drove down to see the Alamo. "Davy Crockett and James Bowie got what was coming to them," Mom said, for stealing this land from the Mexicans. And over to Beaumont, where the oil rigs bobbed like giant birds. In Louisiana, Mom had us climb up the roof of the car and pull down tufts of Spanish moss hanging from the tree branches. After crossing the Mississippi, we swung north to Kentucky, then east. Instead of the flat dirt desert edged by the craggy mountains, the land rolled and dipped like a sheet when you shook it clean. Finally, we entered the hill country, climbing higher and deeper into the Appalachian Mountains, stopping from time to time to let the Oldsmobile catch its breath on the steep, twisting roads. It was November. The leaves had turned brown and were falling from the trees, and a cold mist shrouded the hillsides. There were streams and creeks everywhere. Instead of the irrigation ditches you saw out west, and the air felt different. It was very still, heavier and thicker and somehow darker. For some reason, it made us all grow quiet. At dusk, we approached a bend where the hand-painted signs advertised auto repairs and coal deliveries had been nailed to trees along the roadside. We rounded the bend and found ourselves in a deep valley. Wooden houses and small brick buildings lined the river and rose in uneven stacks on both hillsides. "Welcome to Welch," Mom declared. We drove along dark, narrow streets and then stopped in front of a big, worn house. It was on the downhill side of the street, and we had to descend a set of stairs to get to it. As we clattered onto the porch, a woman opened the door. She was enormous, with pasty skin and about 3 chins. Bobby pins held back her lank gray hair, and a cigarette dangled from her mouth. "Welcome home, son," she said, and gave Dad a long hug. She turned to Mom. "Nice of you to let me see my grandchildren before I die," she said without a smile. Without taking the cigarette out of her mouth, she gave us each a quick, stiff hug. Her cheek was tacky with sweat. "Pleased to meet you, Grandma," I said. "Don't call me Grandma," she snapped. "Name's Irma." "She don't like it none, 'cause it makes her sound old," said a man who appeared beside her. He looked fragile, with short white hair that stood straight up. His voice was so mumbly I could hardly understand him. I didn't know if it was his accent, or maybe if he wasn't wearing his dentures. "Name's Ted, but you can call me Grandpa," he went on. "Don't bother me none being a grandpa." Before Grandpa was a ruddy-faced man with a wild swirl of red hair pushing out from underneath his baseball cap, which had a Maytag logo. He wore a red and black plaid coat, but had no shirt on underneath. He kept announcing over and over again that he was our Uncle Stanley, and he wouldn't stop laughing and kissing me as though I were someone he truly loved and hadn't seen in ages. You could smell the whiskey on his breath, and when he talked, you could see the pink ridges of his toothless gums. I stared at Irma and Stanley and Grandpa, searching for some feature that reminded me of Dad, but I saw none. Maybe this was one of Dad's pranks, I thought. Dad must have arranged for the weirdest people in town to pretend they were his family. In a few minutes, he'd start laughing and tell us where his real parents lived. And we go there, and a smiling woman with perfumed hair would welcome us and feed us with steaming bowls of cream of wheat. I looked at Dad. He wasn't smiling, and he kept pulling at the skin of his neck as if it were itchy. We followed Irma and Stanley and Grandpa inside. It was cold in the house, and the air smelled of mold and cigarettes and unwashed laundry. We huddled around the pot-bellied cast iron stove in the middle of the living room and held out our hands to warm them. Irma pulled a bottle of whiskey from the pocket of her house dress, and Dad looked happy for the first time since we'd left Phoenix. Irma ushered us into the kitchen where she was fixing dinner. A bulb dangled from the ceiling, casting a harsh light on the yellowed walls, which were coated with a thin film of grease. Irma stuck a curved steel handle into an iron disc on top of an old coal cooking stove, lifted it, and with her other hand grabbed a poker from the wall and jabbed at the hot orange coals inside. She stirred a pot full of green beans stewing in the fat back and poured in a big handful of salt. Then she set a tray of Pillsbury biscuits on the kitchen table and ladled out a plate of beans for each of us kids. The beans were so overcooked that they fell apart when I stuck my fork in them, and so salty I could barely force myself to swallow. I pinched my nose closed, which was the way Mom had taught us to get down things that had gone a little bit rotten. Irma saw me and slapped my hand away. "Beggars can't be choosers," she said. There were 3 bedrooms upstairs, Irma said, but no one had been to the second floor in nigh on 10 years because the floorboards were rotted through. Uncle Stanley volunteered to give us his room in the basement and sleep on a cot in the foyer while we were there. "We'll only be staying a few days," Dad said, "until we find a place of our own." After dinner, Mom and us kids went down into the basement. It was a big, dank room with cinder block walls and a green linoleum floor. There was another coal stove, a bed, a pull-out couch where Mom and Dad could sleep, and a chest of drawers painted fire engine red. It held hundreds of dog-eared comic books, Little Lulu, Richie Rich, Beetle Bailey, Archie, and Jughead, that Uncle Stanley had collected over the years. Under the chest of drawers were jugs of genuine moonshine. We kids climbed into Stanley's bed to make it less crowded. Lori and I lay down with our heads in our hands, and Brian and Maureen lay down with theirs at the other. Brian's feet were in my face, so I grabbed him by the ankles and started chewing on his toes. He laughed and kicked and started chewing on my toes in retaliation, and that made me laugh. We heard a loud thunk, thunk, thunk from above. "What's that?" Lori asked. "Maybe the roaches here are bigger than in Phoenix," Brian said. We all laughed, and I heard the thunk, thunk, thunk again. Mom went upstairs to investigate, and then came down and explained that Irma was hitting the floor with a broom handle to signal that we were making too much noise. "She asked that you kids don't laugh while you're in her house," Mom said. "It gets on her nerves." "I don't think Irma likes us very much," I said. "She's just an old woman who's had a tough life," Mom said. "They're all sort of weird," Lori said. "We'll adapt," Mom said. Or move on, I thought. All right, so I'm going to stop there. So let me turn off the recording. Stop recording.